guys wanted to see my slice and reverse an array, right? Okay, we'll do slice first. So, oh my god. So, oh my god. What the hell? Okay, so we do my slice, right? Whoop. And slice is an array method, right? So you dot off an array, right? So the first argument has to be array. And I'll call it original array. Because slice returns a copy of the original array that you're dotting off of, right? So then it has two optional arguments, right? Start and end. Okay, so this problem is a little bit like when you guys already did a my slice one, right? I think. Yeah, with strings. But that one didn't take into account if the start or end index are negative numbers. So that was really the tricky part for this problem, okay? But once you understand like what -1 is really doing, like -2, -3, what those things are really doing, then it becomes a little less complex and more simple, okay? So like before, we have to take into account if they do not pass in a start or end index. And a way I can do that is I could just set this equal to 0 like that, and this equal to original array dot length, right? And the reason why it's original array dot length and not length -1 is because the end index in slice does not include the element at that index. Okay? Does that make sense? Anybody confused so far? Okay. So, just make this that for now. So, now we have to do a check. Because it will be easier for us if they pass in a negative number, it will be easier for us to make a positive number. So what do I mean by that? Like make the negative number a positive number. I mean, like if you have let example array equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I did that dot slice of -1, it would only slice off the last element. When you pass in negative numbers to slice, it starts counting indexes from the back. However, it doesn't start at 0 because there is no -0. There's only 1 0. So a -1 will give you the last index. -2 will give you this index. -3, -4, and -5. Okay? -6 would give you undefined. Okay? So we can say if start is less than 0. Because if something is less than 0, it's negative. Simple if statement. If start is less than 0, we can just say start is equal to original array dot length plus start. If you think about it, this math will always work, right? Because the length of this array is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So if I pass in -1, 5 plus -1 is 4. So the new start index will be at index 4, which is this. And if you remember slice, the start index is inclusive. It includes the thing that is at the start index. So 5 plus -1 would be 4. So if we start at 4, it's going to slice off one element. Well, this element, and then if this was longer, it would slice off everything else, right? If it was -1. Does that make sense? Does everyone see how if it's a negative number, it will always be, this is how you reassign start. If it was -2, we would be starting here, right? 5 plus -2 is 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. Start here, include this, and then go to the end, right? Okay? All right. So then we could do another check. We could do if end is less than 0. And if end is less than 0, we could just do end is equal to original array dot length plus end. The same thing. Because it doesn't matter like that we're stopping here, right? It's just an index. It's just we need to translate because when you're accessing when you're putting elements into an array, its index is always going to be positive, right? It's 0 and then it goes on. But you can access things throwing in a negative number. There is no -1, -2 index. It just goes from the back, right? So this is the same thing. If we say start at -4 and end at -2, it would start here and end here, right? Does everyone agree now if whoever's running my slice, if they passed in nothing for start, nothing for end, or 2 negatives, or 1 negative and a positive, this takes care of this, and this takes care of that logic, right? So now start and end are going to behave exactly like they did in the function you wrote previously. So we can just do a for loop. Oh wait, first, sorry, before the for loop, you have to define your return array, right? Or result array. Because slice returns a copy of the array, right? So we make a new array, and then we do for let I equal what? Start, right? Then we do I is less than end. I plus plus. Then we could just do result array dot push original array at I. Then outside of the for loop, I keep seeing people returning things inside of a for loop. What happens if you just write return after this statement? It just pushes in one element and then the function stops. That's not what we want, right? We want the loop to go all the way through because the return keyword stops a function. Forget about the loop, it just stops the entire function, okay? So we find the curly brace that is the ending curly brace for this for loop, and then we just return, what is it? Result array. So if we do console.log my slice of example array, and then we pass in -1, we'll get 5. If we pass in -4, we get everything except the first element. If we pass in -4, -2, we get 2, 3. If we pass in just -4 and then 2, we get 2, right? Because -2 would actually be index 3. So that's why -2 has 2 elements and 2 only has 1. Is anybody confused by that, by this solution? It makes sense, right? You're getting in, you know that indexes go from 0 to whatever the length is, -1, right? So none of those will ever be negative. So it makes sense to make that negative start and negative end just into a positive number that will be the same thing. If we know that array.slice of -1 will return us a copy of just the last element, right? It just goes from the back. Okay? Cool. So now I will do rotate array. And this will take an array, and it will take a num, right? So, as you saw in the solution, it gives you a little like blurb on why the solution it does, that it provides works, right? So I'm not going to show you that solution. I'm going to do it a different way, okay? Because there's many ways to solve all these problems, but I'm going to do it in a longer way. The solution is probably the best way because it's, 3 lines of code, and it's very, clean, easy to read. But I'm going to show you in a different way. So, we can say, well, let me put this down here. So, example array, right? So if we're passing example array into this function and num is 1, what we want is everything in this place to move once, one place over, and the last one will be here, right? If it's 2, we want this one to move 2 times, and etc., right? That's how many times we want to reverse it. So we can do this. First, we could say let result, right? And my logic is saying that we will start at a different point in the input array each time, depending on what the number is. And then we will loop through that point to the end and put it into the result. Then, after we're done there, we will loop through that same array again, start at the beginning, and go till that point again, right? So, and I'm pretty sure you have to take into account negative numbers, right? Yeah. So, we can do this. We can do that same check again, right? We can do if num is less than 0, num equals array dot length plus num. Right? This is the same logic I just displayed to you guys for slice. So now we have a starting point in the index, right? So we can do this. We can say for let I, and we're going to say is going to be equal to array dot length minus num. Then we're going to go until I is less than array dot length. We're going to go until this statement is no longer true, until I is equal to the length, right? And we're going to increment I every time. Then all we do is just push the element into the result. So let's say we passed in num here, right? Let's say we passed in 1, right? So we're saying, is 1 less than 0? No. So we say I is now going to be equal to the length, which is 5, minus 1, which is 4, right? What does that give us? What index is that? That's the last index, right? So we start at 5. We push 5 into this empty array. Didn't I show you that if you move everything once over, 5 will be at the beginning and everything else will be at the end? Right? So what would happen if I did -1? If I passed in -1, I will reassign that value to 5 plus -1, which is 4. And what is index 4? Here, right? And we say, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Plus 9, -1 is 4. Ray dot length minus 9. Wait, I did this before. One second. So then, well, let's just like focus on positive numbers for now, right? So we have for let I, after we start at our starting point, right? Then we'll go back to the beginning. So we'll set let I equal to 0, and we'll say I is less than array dot length minus num. So now we're going to stop at the same place we started, and then we just say result dot push array of I. And then we could just return result. So if I say rotate array, oh wait, let me rotate array of example array, and then 1, we'll get 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I go 2, we'll get 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. If I go -1, is that supposed to be the right way? Oh yeah, that's why this works. I forgot the question. Yeah, I was like, why isn't this working? So I forgot, like this question is if you pass in a negative number, you want to rotate the other way, right? Oh, that's oh, yeah. Sorry about that. So yeah, so that's why this starts, right? So if we passed in a -1 up here, we would reassign it to the end of the array. So that means we're starting at index 4. Well, not starting, that we're assigning it to 4, right? Then our for loop, the first for loop we do, we set I equal to the length, which would be 5, right? Which would be 5 if we use this array, minus the number, which is 4, right? So that means we start at index 1. It's all good, guys. Nothing to see here. But you guys see how if we start at index 1, we're actually going to put 2, 3, 4, 5 in because we go to the end, right? And then if we do it the other way in this loop, we say let I equal to 0, and we stop at 1 when I is equal to 1, right? Then we put 1 in at the end. So it's reversing it in the other direction if we pass in negative numbers. This is just another way to solve that problem without doing a lot of methods dotting off each other. Both are fine. Any questions on this? Do you guys understand the solution?
Bottom and just after console log, I couldn't see what.
There's nothing.
Oh, negative. Okay.
Oh yeah, -1, yeah.
I couldn't see it.
Does this make sense? Are you guys sure?
One second, real quick.
Yeah.
On the line 26, it says that if num is smaller than 0.
Yeah.
Does it matter num is smaller than 0 or greater or equal? Because num, a real length plus whatever number It won't.
So like if so the in the problem it says that if it's positive, reverse it this way. If it's negative, reverse it the other way, right? So we have to take that into account. It's not like slice anymore where, oh yeah, if it's a negative number, we're just gonna start from the back. No, it's not like that. If the number is negative, we want this loop to start at a different place. And it's not gonna be at like what the index would be if it were in the slice, right? Because if it was -1 in slice, it would start at the last index, right? But we don't actually want that. We want a loop until this. So that means we set it equal to that same number. We still assign it to that number, but we use it in our loop in a different way. We start off by saying I is less than the length 5 minus the number. So if it was -1, you agree it would be 4, right? So then we would start at index 1. So we start at 2, 3, 4, 5. And we rotated everything one way, this way, right? This one comes over here, and everything moves like here. Because after this is done, after we start at 2 and go to the end, and we put everything in result, the only thing left to do is set I equal to the beginning, and then loop until that same number. Array.length minus num. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Specifically, which loop is for if it's negative and which one is for if it's positive?
Neither. So it doesn't really matter if it's negative or positive. It's just saying that this one is going to start at the number, right? So this is thinking before I answer that question, this is thinking of this problem in a completely different way from rotating places, okay? I personally get confused when people are asking me to rotate like matrices, you know? Like when somebody asks you to rotate a grid 90 degrees, I'm like, what do you mean? So it's kind of like thinking of, okay, if you rotate it -1 places, what would the outcome be? If you rotate it -3 places, what would the outcome be? And I try to think of a solution that would just make those numbers move that way. Just make that equal that, you know? So this is saying that if num is less than 0, we're just going to make that number positive. Okay? So everything past that line, num will always be positive. Here is just saying, okay, first we're going to start at, let's say like we wanted to move these, let's say we wanted to, so it's kind of hard for me to think. Let's say we wanted to do, like 3, right? So that means 1 would move 3 places, right? 1, 2, 3. So then it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So if 1, 2 should be at the end and 3, 4, 5 should be at the beginning, how do I get to the array here? How do I start at 3, 4, like you start at the 3, 4, 5. You start wherever the first value should be in the result, right? And then you push everything into there until the end. And then everything that was left over, you just put onto the end. Right? So if I pass in 3, we skip the if statement because it's greater than 0. And we say I is equal to array.length 5 minus 3, which is 2. 0, 1, 2, I got to the 3. And this math works for any number I pass in. Any number of times I want to rotate it. So I start here and go to the end, and I want to put that in the front of the array. Then, that's the first for loop. Just a starting point to the end. Then, I want to write another for loop. Start at 0, always. And then go until this place started, right? Not including this. So it's less than that. And that's how I get the 1, 2 at the end. Quick math. 2 plus 2 is 4. All right, whatever. Any other questions? Before we start objects. All right, cool. Let's start objects. I don't know. Yeah, I guess I like objects more than arrays, honestly. I like working with objects more. So, what is an object? That is an object. This is an object. This is an empty object. Before, you guys have been using curly braces to open blocks of code, right? If blocks, function blocks, loop blocks, and while loops and for loops, right? But if you set a variable equal to an open and closed curly brace, this is a data type. This is an object, okay? Like if I console.log type of my object, I get object, okay? Have I lost anybody so far? Cool. So, what is the point of objects? So before I go into that, an object, like that was an empty object, right? In object, so arrays store things in order, and you can access them by numbered indexes, right? It's always in an order, and it's always like index 0, 1, 2, 3, right? Right? Objects also store, and arrays can store any type of data, right? They can store arrays, they can store booleans, numbers, and strings, right? Objects are the same thing, except they're not, the order of them is not guaranteed, and they store things differently. There's no numerical index. They're stored in something called key value pairs, okay? So let me show you what I mean. Let's say, let Bilbo, and I'm going to set him equal to an object. And I'm going to press enter. So everything I put in here will be properties of the Bilbo object, okay? So when I say key value pairs, it's going to be a string key, colon, any value. In JavaScript, the keys of an object are always strings, okay? So I can write species, and then I could write hobbit, right? And then, if I wanted to add something else, I put a comma, just like arrays, right? This is the key, this is the value. All keys are what? Yeah, right? So, I understand, like, I put quotes there, you can do that, but also, you can just do, age 111, right? And it's the same thing. Oh, nope. You can omit the quotes when you're writing keys. JavaScript will coerce that into a string no matter what you write, because it knows you're not trying to access a variable. But what if you wanted to make the key dynamic? What if you wanted it to make it like a variable, like in a for loop or something, like array of I or something? This is what you would do. So let's say I have let age variable, and I'm going to set that equal to 111. If I did age variable, oh no, this is going to be equal to age, my bad. If I just did age variable like this, I would get species hobbit, but then this key is actually a string age variable. That's not what we want, right? So how do we do this? It's very simple. It may look like I'm just making it an array, but you could think of this sort of like bracket notation, right? Accessing something bracket 0, bracket 1, right? I'm saying bracket a variable, so JavaScript will say, oh, okay, this isn't a string, I have to get the value of this and then make that a string. So now we see species, hobbit, age 11. Does that make sense? This is all new, so just try and take it in slowly, okay? And just like arrays, it can hold anything, right? So we could do stole ring from Gollum, and that will be true, right? And it's fine. You can hold anything, even arrays and even other objects. So yes, nested objects are a thing, okay? So, this is all nice, but when are you ever going to really define an object like this? Like just not programmatically, not dynamically, just like hard coding objects. Never, right? So, there's ways that we can actually add things to objects, just like, you can add things to arrays, right? Push and unshift, and then you could pop and shift, right? There are other things that you can do, but they're not actually methods. Let me show you what I mean. So let's say we'll do Gandalf now. Gandalf. That's going to be equal to species, an object with a species key, and it's going to be a wizard, right? So, how do I explain this? So, if I wanted to add another key value pair to this, there's two ways I can do that. There's bracket notation, which you guys are familiar with, and then there's also dot notation, okay? So let me just show you a quick example of what that would look like. I can do Gandalf, so I'm saying Gandalf, the Gandalf object, bracket, a string, because they're strings, right? Defeated Balrog. And I just say equals true. So now, if I console.log Gandalf, you see that it was put into the object. Adding things into objects is basically saying, I'm going to access this key, and I'm just going to reassign whatever that was, it's going to be reassigned now to this value. Adding things to objects and reassigning existing values in objects to different values are the same. Okay? But that's just bracket notation. This is dot notation. Colors is an array. Gandalf dot colors. Dot notation is a little different than bracket notation because here, if you wanted an actual key that's called defeated Balrog in the object, you have to put it in quotes. If you omitted these quotes, it would be like saying there's a let value equal like that, right? And then here we can pass value, and then here it would still say defeated Balrog, right? Because the brackets, JavaScript says it's evaluating what that variable is. So if we didn't put this in here and this didn't exist, you would get a reference error. It would say value doesn't exist. It's not defined, right? Does that make sense? Okay? So the thing about dot notation is what if I said let this is a color array equal to colors. We want this to still be colors. We don't want this as a color array, right? But if I do this dot, this is a color array, I get this is a color array as a key. The dot takes everything to the right of it and coerces whatever you typed into a string. It does not evaluate what the variable is. Okay? This could be useful, but it could also be dangerous. Okay? Does that make sense? That's the key difference. Brackets can evaluate variables and get what they're equivalent to. Dot just takes everything to the right of it and makes it that, right? And like since I said, so let's turn this back to colors because it's shorter, right? So does everyone agree that there is a key? Let me make this bigger. There's a key called colors, and its value is an empty array, right? How do I access that value? I sort of said it before. It's the same as adding a value. It's Gandalf dot colors. Now I can do anything to it, right? Like if Gandalf dot colors is accessing the value at the key colors, and that's an array, right? So I can do dot push. Nope. Dot push. Right? So now we have an array with gray inside. And I could do it again because there's something wrong with me. Just wanted to make white in there too. Oh my god. Dot colors, my bad. But you can also do it like this. Bracket notation, dot notation, interchangeably used. If you're referencing a variable, use bracket notation. If you're not, you can still use bracket notation, and like if you know what the actual key's name is, but make sure it's in strings, okay? Dot notation will take anything and just look for a value that's named that, okay? So that's adding and reassigning even. I can do, like I could say species equals not a wizard, right? And it gets reassigned to not a wizard. But I'm going to delete that because that's just not true. So, how do I get rid of something? It's a lot easier than you would think. I literally write delete Gandalf.species. And it's gone. Who wants me to say that again? I literally write delete Gandalf.species. That's how you delete a key value pair from an object, using the delete keyword. It's no longer there. Who thinks that's easy? Nobody? Well, this Jesus Christ. All right. So, sorry. Okay, before we go into the slides, I'm just going to show you 1.5 other things. So what is the point, like, you know, like you can loop through arrays, right? But arrays are ordered and they have indexes. So you can do a for loop and you can increase an incrementer every time using I, set it equal to 0, and you could go through the array, right? You can start at any point, you can go through it, right? But I told you that objects are not ordered all the time, and they don't have indexes. They have key value pairs. So if you don't know like what the key is, then what's the point of them, right? So I'll keep Gandalf over here. I'll keep all this. So I'll just access this thing again. Console.log species in Gandalf. true. The in keyword, okay? I can say species in Gandalf will return a Boolean if that value is inside of it or not, okay? So, if I like misspelled it, spies, you get false. That key does not exist in that object. Does that make sense? It's basically asking the object, hey, object, is this thing inside of you? And then the object says false or true, okay? As a key. Bless you. Does that make sense? But like, who cares, right? Then you have to manually check every time. But what if I told you you could loop through an object using the in keyword? And that's what we call a for in loop. For, I can say let key, this could be any word, right? Because I'm just like in a for loop, you can say let I, let j, let index, let hello world, whatever. This is just a variable. Let key in Gandalf. Console.log key console.log Gandalf at key. Species wizard defeated Balrog, true, colors gray white. The key, anything, the value that you declare here in the for loop parentheses in the definition will represent the key in every key in the object. Each time it makes a loop, it's just going to go through it every time. Okay, go through all of the keys. So how do we get the value? I do Gandalf at key. So this is actually a very powerful way to loop through objects. And you see the key is species, right? And then Gandalf at key is wizard, right? What if I did Gandalf dot key? Oh, no. Whoa. What if I did that? What's it going to look for every time? It's going to look for a key that literally says key, okay? And that would return undefined every time. That's why dot notation can be useful in some cases, but in other cases, it's all about bracket notation. Dynamically, since key is going to change every time, and we have to pass that, capture that into a variable, we want to use bracket notation, right? If you wanted to just, like dot notation is quick, if let's say you wanted to add something to the object that you're going to use a lot, like an object method, like a function, like object keys can hold functions, and we'll talk about that tomorrow, okay? But you guys see how if I use key, it's looking in the Gandalf object for a key that's called key. And it's not there. So if you try to access something in an object at a key that doesn't exist, you get undefined. Just like if you access something in an array at an index that isn't in there, right? If the length is 2 and you're looking at index 5, you're going to get undefined. Same thing with strings, right? It's just undefined. Okay? And before we go into the slides, let me just show you one other thing. So there's 2 methods that I think you guys will find of use. And you get them off the global object. Okay? This is object.keys, and object.values. You could read about them on MDN. What you pass object.keys and object.values is an entire object. I don't know why I just wrote object. And what you get, oh wait. Wait. God damn it. What you get is the object that you pass into object.keys returns an array of just the keys. Object.values does the same thing, except it returns an array of values. Does that make sense? Object.keys, pass in the object, you get all the get all the keys in an array. Object.values, you pass in an object, what you get is an array of all the values. Okay? Any questions about objects before we continue? Before I dive into the slides. Yeah.
Can you just repeat the part wherein the difference between dot and the bracket thing? In terms of
Yeah.
object?
So when I'm accessing something in a bracket form, you can pass in a variable. And then it will read, JavaScript will say, okay, you're using bracket notation. It's saying, okay, I'm going to look into the Gandalf object. I'm going to look for this key. But you're using bracket notation, and this is what is variable we don't know. It has to find what that is, right? So that's how you do that with a variable, right? And it's going to look for a key of whatever the variable is equal to. That makes sense, right? Like you can do that with arrays. Like if you set something to a number, like I, right? You set I to a number, and you do that with arrays all the time in formulas. The difference is the dot. The dot notation is different. The dot says whatever is to the right of the dot will now be a string, and that will be the key that I will be adding, looking for, whatever. Literally what you write. So if you're like writing I, right, like in a for in loop, or in a for loop or something, the dot notation will look for a key of just I, just one character. Okay? It won't be different each loop. Like in the for in loop, how key is different every time. Key is going to be a different key every time in a for in loop. But if you use the dot, it's just going to look for key, K-E-Y, as a key every single time. And you'll get nothing. Unless you actually have something in there that's key. Then you'll get the same thing. Does that make sense? Cool.
And another thing will be how do you identify the length of the object?
Oh, objects do not have a length property. A quick way to do that would be object.keys.length, right?
To count the number of keys present.
Yeah. Wait, I don't think do objects object.size, is that a thing? Nope. No, wait. Is that a thing? No. Okay. There are some like object-like data types, not data types. I don't know. Like there's other objects like sets and maps and stuff that have size properties, but the actual object itself does not. Okay, don't use that. But a quick way to do that would be object.keys, pass in the object, you get an array of all the keys, right? So you could just do a dot length off that, and you can get how many things are in there. Any other questions?
Can you explain why that will give you undefined again?
Because cool. Because the dot notation is saying I'm going to look inside Gandalf. It sees the dot. JavaScript sees the dot, and it says everything to the right of this. I do not care if that is a variable or not. Everything to the right of that, I'm going to coerce it into a string, like the actual letters you type, K-E-Y, and it will just look for a property, a key, inside Gandalf that is literally key. And there is nothing in here that is key, right? So Gandalf at something else that doesn't exist will always be undefined. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Or if we dive into the slides?
Is it possible to delete just the value or just the key, or is it always the pair?
If you want to delete the value, you could just set the value equal to undefined. You can't delete a key and leave the value. You can't have like a value floating in theoretical space, right? But like if you set the value equal to undefined and you do object.keys, then it will still print. I think. Yes. Okay, cool. Any questions? Cool. All right. Get into these slippity slides. Slippity slides. How do you guys feel about objects? Are they confusing?
Less so.
Yeah? All right. So during these slides, we will talk about what an object is, why they're useful, the type of object, accessing, adding, changing, deleting values, the in operator for in loop, object.keys, and nested arrays and objects. Okay? So what is an object? An object is an unordered collection of key value pairs. Most languages have something like this. Most languages have something like this. Like in Python, it's a dictionary, right? So like arrays, objects store values, but instead of storing them in numeric indices, objects store values in string keys, okay? Or keys, key value. You have the key, you get the value, right? So let my array is equal to value 1, value 2, my object, key 1, value 1, key 2, value 2, console.log my array at 0, console.log my object at key 1, you get value 1 every time. Right? Who's confused by this? There's kind of nothing to be confused about, I would say. It's just kind of like, this is a new thing, and this is how it works. So remember that, all right? Yeah.
So console log my array at 0. Oh wait, never mind. Got it.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
You could also do my object dot key 1.
Yes, you can. Cool. All right. Why are objects useful? Consider representing Pusheen the cat as an array. Let Pusheen equal an array of a string Pusheen, then 7, then a string Gray and Tabby. An array is a good place to hold an ordered list of values, but it doesn't store any information about what those values represent. This is another true thing about objects that are really helpful. An object string keys allows objects to store more information about the values within it. Let Pusheen, name is Pusheen, age 7, color Gray and Tabby, right? Right? It's more descriptive. Yeah, I get it, like looping through arrays where you deal with numbers and it's just math the whole time, that's fine. But like, if you always want, let's say you have like, you're getting a giant array of data, right? And inside of that array were other arrays representing like human data about like individual humans, right? And you have to remember that their name is always at index 23. And then at index 24, it's always going to be this. Doesn't make any sense, right? You could just do that dot name, and you know you're going to get the name, and your code will be more readable, right? So that's why, like, when you're actually working in real life and you're working with real, like, data and stuff like that, you'll usually find an array of objects or an object with arrays as values and stuff like that. Like, they're all going to be nested together because they're easy to navigate. Type of object is object. Right? Needed a whole slide to show you that. Cool. Creating an object. Creating a new object using curly braces. An object's keys are always strings, but you can omit the quotation marks. Oh, sorry. So this is the same as before. Machine the object. Let machine equals object. It's the same, but see we're omitting the quotes. Don't write the quotes. You don't need them, right? It's just going to make whatever you write there into a string. And I showed you if you wanted to make the key like this an actual variable, you would just put brackets around it. Right? Use bracket notation to access a value. Pass a string into the brackets that corresponds with a key in the object. So console.log pusheen of bracket string name will give you string age, string color, string not a key in the object. You get pusheen 7 grand tabby and undefined because the string not a key in the object is not a key, right? So you get undefined every time. If it's not in the object, you're going to get undefined if you try to access its value. Okay? Any questions? Cool. Any variable or expression that evaluates to a string can be passed into the brackets. So I showed you a little bit of this too, right? So it's the same object, machine, but now we're defining a variable, key to check, and we're going to set that equal to name. So if we do console.log, machine key to check, and you could even do something like this. Console.log, machine, a string col plus a string or, which is what? Color, you get the same thing. Pusheen, grand tabby. This works the same way as accessing things in arrays. Like you can do array at 5 plus 5 and it'll give you 10, right? It's the same thing. Any questions? I'm just going to stop me at any point if you have any questions about anything. You can also use dot notation to access values. Let pusheen name, age, color, same thing. Key to check, name, same thing. Console.log pusheen.name. No quotes needed with dot notation. You don't need quotes. .age, .color, .key to check. Why do we get undefined when we're looking at pusheen .key to check? Because there is no key to check. There's nothing to retrieve. There is no key value pair where the key is key to check. Because that is what dot notation is doing. It's taking everything to the right of the dot and coercing it to a string. It's not really coercing it, it's just, yeah, coercing is like the wrong word because key to check does not have, it's not like a data type. It's not like a Boolean that we're coercing to a string, right? It's just saying everything to the right is the string, is the key we're looking for. It doesn't matter if that is the name of a variable somewhere. We don't care about that, okay? Any questions? Okay. Adding a key value pair, use bracket notation or dot notation to add a key value pair. Pusheen bracket sister equals Stormy. Pusheen dot brother equals Pip. Console.log Pusheen. Name Pusheen, age 7, color grand tabby, sister Stormy, brother Pip. Right? Does anybody know what this is referencing?
That cat from the emojis, like the text, it's like a great cat.
That, are you really? Is that from like anything else?
It's like a
It's like a
Japanese
Hello
cat.
Kitty thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, same company.
It's so weird. Alright, whatever. It's weird that like out of everything on Earth, they like pick fishing. Like why? I don't know. Whatever. Any questions on adding values? Okay. Use bracket notation or dot notation to change a value. What is age going to be? Is it? It's going to be 9 because we say the age here is 7. Then we're saying Pasheen at age is now going to be equal to 8. Okay, but on the next line we say Pasheen.age plus plus. So we add 1 to that. Because plus plus is loosely shorthand for plus equals 1. I say loosely because it's not really. Okay? Yeah.
What happens if you don't put the age in quotes?
If you don't put the age in quotes, JavaScript will say that you're using bracket notation. This is not a string, so this must be a variable. So let's go look for age. So where is it? It's nowhere, right? So we'll get a reference error. So if you don't want to use quotes, just use dot. Kind of like use every way possible to avoid using quotes, you know? Like if you're using a bracket, it should be a variable, no quotes. If you're using dot and you know the thing, just do dot, like no quotes, you know? Easy. Does this make sense? Cool. Deleting a key value pair. So use the delete keyword to delete a key value pair. Left Pasheen equal the Japanese cat. Delete Pasheen of age, delete Pasheen.color. All that's left is the name. This is straightforward, right? Delete this. Like it's plain English. Delete this, delete this. Yeah.
So if you wanted to delete, so every time you're deleting a string, do you have to use that format, or could I have used machine.name?
Wait, what? Wait. What?
Machine.age, rather.
Yeah, because I'm doing machine.color here,
Okay,
right?
so it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. And if I wanted to say let name variable equal to a string name, and I did delete machine bracket no string but name variable, it would delete this.
Okay, yeah.
It's the same. Everything works the same way with bracket and dot notation. Deleting, adding, reassigning, whatever. Cool? All right. So now let's talk about the in operator, which I showed you. Use the in operator to check if a key is in the object. Console.log, string, name in Pasheen. Sadness in Pasheen, true, false. This you have to use strings or variables, okay? Because this is not like dot notation, not like accessing things, right? This is an actual operation, okay? So like a plus, right? A plus you could use one variable plus another variable. If there's strings or their numbers, whatever, it's going to look up to see what the value is and spit out the combined value, right? The in, if this was let name variable, you could say name variable in Pasheen. Okay? So quotes name in Pasheen, quote sadness in Pasheen, get true, false. It's just a Boolean if it's in there or not. Who's confused? No one? Someone? Everyone? All right. For in loop. Use the for in loop to loop through all the keys in an object. This is very, very, very important and useful, okay? The for in loop you will be using all the time, okay? It's literally written the same way, except there's no colons, there's no like I, there's no plus plus, there's no until this. It's going to do it until it hits them all. Okay, it's just going to loop through all the keys, and all you do is you write for open parens let key, just like you're saying let I. This doesn't have to be key, but key is kind of like the I, right? I is like universal. Oh, okay, like array at I, like this at I, this at this index. So here we say key because it's all keys and variables, and this it's all keys and objects, and this variable that you're declaring will represent the key always.
Is there like if there's an I and J, is there a key in something else?
Nah. Yeah, then you would that's up to you. Second key, I don't know. Yeah, because if Pasheen at key was an object and you wanted to loop through that, then like what do you do, right? But at that point, usually in real life, like you would know, like if you are looping through something and you do want to loop through something else, you kind of know what that type of data would be. So it also makes sense to not use key if you know what those keys are representing. Like I could say if I was looping through an object where everything was an object representing human information of a human, I would say let human equal. Let human in this object, right? Honestly, naming variables is like an art, and it's hard sometimes. Naming functions, variables, it's kind of hard sometimes. Honestly. So we say let key in Pasheen. We're going to console.log a string that says Pasheens, comma, key is, comma, Pasheen at key. Does everyone understand why this is happening? We're adding up all these. Well, no, I'm sorry. We're not adding up. We're just console logging all of these values. Okay. Pasheen's name, age, color. That's key, and it loops through the object every single time and stops until there's nothing left. Okay. And key, the thing you declare here, is always going to be capturing the actual key of the object. And at that point of time in the loop, right? Like looping, it's like, okay, run through it, and key is this at this point of time, right? So that means Pasheen at key, when key is name, Pasheen at name is Pasheen. So that's how you get the key and the value. Key is just the variable. The value is the object at that variable. Make sense? Is anyone confused by foreign loops?
And you don't need to put the key in quotation.
No. Why? Then it would just be the string key, and it would be the same thing as using dot notation in the for loop. Nice. Use the for loop to loop through all the keys in the objects. Ha! Pasheen's name is undefined, age is undefined, color is undefined. Because we're using dot notation. So we're no longer looking for what the value key is every time. And you see key does have a value, name, age, color. This does have a value. It's a variable. But if we do dot key, it just looks for the property key every time. Right? So don't use dot notation in foreign loops, really. Unless you're like referencing something else in another object you're not looping through that you know like something. You know what I mean? You have to know what this is every time, and it can't be changing. Then we have object.keys. So you use object.keys to get an array of the keys in the object. This is very self-explanatory, okay? Who has questions on this? Object.keys, open parentheses. You just pass in any object, and you're always going to get an array of keys. If you pass in an empty object, you will just get an array, because there are no keys. Okay? Is that confusing to anybody? And it's off the global object. like array.isArray, it's object.keys, okay? And then you pass in an object. It's not like Pusheen.keys, okay? Because then what would that do? It would look for a value in Pusheen, okay? Nested arrays. Should be nested objects, right? Objects can store any type of value, including, oh, the array is nested, including arrays and other objects. And this is how you can access the things here, right? The actual values inside of the array that is in colors. Pusheen.colors bracket 0. Pusheen.colors bracket 1. Because what is Pusheen.colors equal to? An array. And how do you access things in an array? With numeric indices. And that's how you do it. Pusheen.colors at 0, Pusheen.colors at 1 gives you gray and then tabby. And this is fine. You can have a key where its value is an array. Just like in arrays, at indexes can be other arrays. That's normal. Maybe not normal, but like, yeah, maybe it is normal. Maybe it's not, I don't know. But it's allowed. It's valid code. It's valid JavaScript, okay? Is anybody confused at how gray and tabby are in the top right corner of the screen? Objects can store, okay, including other objects. This is sort of the same thing, and this makes sense, right? If we have another thing over here, siblings, and that is an object, with sisters, sister is the key, and Stormy is the value. Is this true? This little gray cat that's an emoji, it has siblings?
That I don't know.
I feel like you know everything about Pusheen. Like, I don't know why. Can anybody validate this? Is this like a true thing? Yeah? You guys know about this. Like, I don't know. Honestly, I should know about this. I've been teaching this for like a while. Anyway, so the key is sister, the value is a string Stormy. The key is brother, the value is a string Pip, right? And this whole object is the value to a key siblings inside Pusheen, right? Who's confused by that? It's like a nested array, except it's a nested object. The key is just a string. The value is an object. Inside that object, there are also key value pairs. So we could just do Pusheen dot siblings dot sister, and we got Stormy. Pusheen dot siblings dot brother, we got Pip. Thought it's a plip. I don't know. Is that confusing? It's sort of like array add 0, right? That object dot key dot key. Yeah.
Is the key type always a string?
Yes. They're always strings. Instead of dot siblings dot sister, it could be bracket a string siblings, bracket a string sister. It's the same thing. It's okay, guys. Don't get scared. Yeah.
Is a key that is multiple words, is that like in camel case?
Oh yeah. Okay. I'll show you like an example of that after. Okay. Like after the slides. They're like done right now. I'll do it back in REPL, so you because it's not in the slides. Any other questions? So a recap: we did what is an object, why are objects useful, type of object, accessing, adding, deleting, and editing, changing keep values in an object. The in operator, the for loop, object.keys, and we talked a little bit about nested arrays and objects. So let me show you. So I just heard a great question. What if I wanted to make wait, can you do that? Yes. Okay. Yeah, I thought so. I don't know. I got confused for a second. So you can make a string a key in an object that has spaces. Okay? But only with bracket notation. And that makes complete sense, right? Because envision yourself doing this with dot notation. Like if I would have to say this is a test, right? And I would get true. But if I did it in bracket notation, I mean dot notation, dot this space is a test. Look, it's going crazy, right? Because this doesn't make any sense. It's saying Gandalf dot this. Don't worry about why that's blue. You don't have to know about that yet. I think we talk about this tomorrow. There's a keyword called this that's really confusing in JavaScript, and it's a reason why a lot of people don't like JavaScript as a language, because this is really confusing. Don't worry about that. But it's saying Gandalf dot this space. What is this variable? What is this variable? What is this variable? Right? Does that make sense? This is really confusing, okay? Do you see? Do you see? Do you see? Do you guys see? There's a lot. This is confusing. We'll talk about it tomorrow, though. Well, briefly. You don't have to worry about the this keyword for bootcamp prep, and it's not going to be on the assessment to get into the bootcamp. But this is actually very confusing, so FullStack likes you to get a little bit of an introduction before you go into the bootcamp, because in the bootcamp you will learn a lot about this, and this is very confusing. So tomorrow we're going to talk about that when we talk about object methods. And quick spoiler, object methods are just functions. Object methods are properties in an object. The key is still a string because object keys are always strings, right? But the value will be a function. Cool. Any questions before you guys take a break? Like a 5-minute break? Cool. Take 5 minutes and then I'll slack out pairs. Thank you. Thank you all.